we are going to be learning about Daniel for the next couple weeks. And I don't actually think the entire 12-week lesson's on Daniel. I think it's going to go between Daniel and Esther. So tonight's just an introduction on Daniel, and I don't know if they're going to intertwine them because I'm only teaching tonight. So it'll be... Oh, okay. I was hoping they'd intertwine them when I was reading the introduction, so... But yeah, so we're going to be doing 6 weeks of Daniel, and then 6 weeks of Esther. Jeff just asked me to teach tonight because he's been super exhausted, so I am going to take care of it tonight. Hope you don't mind. All right, so introduction to Daniel. Daniel was pretty much born at one of the lowest times in the Hebrew history. Jerusalem was in ashes, and the temple was in ruins. He had literally, they were in captivity, and that's the world that he was born into, was being in, and that's kind of where it starts. So I guess I shouldn't say he was born into that, because he wasn't born into it. He was around a teenager when he was taken into captivity. So he does have memories of what life was like for being Judas at that time. And he then went into captivity as a teenager, and that he did have something to go off of. I didn't actually know that, so yeah. So one of the things that is kind of amazing about the entire Daniel story is many of us, when you think of Daniel, what do you think of? Lion's Den. I mean, that's the key thing that almost all of us could tell you the story of Daniel and Lion's Den. But in all reality, if you think about it from Daniel's point of view, when Daniel was a teenager and going about his life, in no way, shape, or form did he think that where his life was going to go. There's no way he could have known where his life was going to go, right? What did God have in store for him? He was basically one of the highest prime ministers of the court, was an interpreter of dreams, prophet, teacher, ruler, and was a lifelong voice of God. I'm guessing most of you as a teenager did not think this is going to be my life and have that laid out before you. It's actually really funny because one of the things I talk about when I'm talking to parents about doing foreign travel with kids, one of the things we talk about is the fact that first world nation does not mean first world nation, right? So just because America and Germany both share first world nation, that does not mean that that is the same world when you walk into Germany. And one of the examples I bring up of that is the fact that Germans at 10 years old take a test, and that test tells you what you're going to do the rest of your life. Now, not exactly, but it tells you whether you're going to, I don't know, flip burgers, be an electrician, or be a CEO. Something like that. I don't know what the 3 divisions are, but there are 3 divisions. And when I say that, I always think back to when I was 10 years old and think, what would I have tested on that test? Because I can almost guarantee you I'd been very impressed if I taught into the realm of being a teacher, which, by the way, is, I think, their highest testing to be able to go into education in that field. So I don't believe as a 10-year-old, at least as my memory serves me, that would have been something I would have tested into. I'm not saying I would have been a fry cook, but I don't know if I would have tested in the highest section. And that's the kind of thing that I look back on and think about when I think about with Daniel, because with Daniel, who you are as a teenager, 13, 14, 15 years old, and then having this great light laid out before you is it's awesome, honestly. So it's also scary. All right.
In that direction?
You are allowed, you go into a different education. So basically at 10 years old, they say, you're going to go to the low school, the middle school, or the highest school. So, and then from there, supposedly now in 2025, you can actually change the level at some point, but they say that, but I think they say that to sound less German. I think for the most part, you're pretty much stuck in the tier that you're in. If you don't remember the girl, Anne Katrine, that came and stayed with Dwayne and Dan, she was in the highest one when in gymnasium was what they call it, but she was in the highest one when she came here. That's actually who I learned all about this from. So, yeah. All right. So, through the central character of the book, Daniel is the hero. So, even though Daniel is who the book is about, and he is the prophet that's this, as we talked about with Josh's study of battles, who is actually the hero? I'm going to tell Josh that none of you were paying attention. God, yeah. God is the actual hero, right? God is who actually does all this stuff. Is it actually Daniel doing this stuff? No. He was showing great faith, and because he was showing this great faith, God kept on using him in bigger and better ways throughout his life. In Daniel 2:28, he even went to a point where he told the king, there is a God in heaven, and it was the God in heaven who sustained Daniel and the people while in captivity. He kept on leading this, and he kept on pushing and he had no fear in standing before one of the most powerful people, actually the most powerful person in the area, and said, no, God is king, not you. And that's I don't think there is a single person in here that can truly understand exactly, because even standing before the president is not the most powerful person, in the country even. Like, there are people, there's checks and balances. In that day and age, it was truly all the power was given to this person that he was standing before. Yes?
Credentials to verify that he was serving God and that Nebuchadnezzar better listen to him.
Yeah.
In that verse.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is important for us. To
Yeah.
say it's one thing, to be able to do it's another thing. In whatever we're doing,
Yeah.
whether it's our Christian walk, our secular walk, whatever, behoves us, I think, to be able to do whatever we're charged.
Yeah. I got given a compliment a couple weeks ago from a person I rarely talk about or rarely talk to, and was I did not realize he had that high of an opinion of me. But what he told me was, one of the reasons that I think you are so good at your job is you're one of the few people in the school district that when you say you're going to do something, you do it. You have the follow through, you make sure it happens. And I don't know if he made it as a flippant comment or not, but that means a lot to me, because I'm very big, a lot because of my Christian nature, that my word is my bond. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to make sure it happens. It also means when I'm sitting somewhere and I'm not sure something can happen, I'm very careful on not promising anything. Jeff has talked about, and I am very big on this with my kids, but I do not promise them anything. Or my favorite saying, our business manager that passed away this year, her response to us all the time when I was like, yeah, are we going to get this, this, and this? And she'd always either say, Lord willing, and you hear people say stuff like that. This woman believed it. Lord willing, if I can get here tomorrow, that's absolutely true. And even her, she wouldn't promise beyond, she knew exactly the fact that she wouldn't necessarily be here the next day. So it was, we have these sayings in our English language that say things like this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually mean them when you say them. And I gave a whole lesson on awesome several years ago about the fact that we overuse the word awesome, that awesome should only be used in context with God. And I have said before, I've fallen back into habits of saying it, but it is true. There are things that when you use those words, like saying, Lord willing, I hope you actually mean. That's my little prayer. Yep, as long as God lets me tomorrow, I'm going to do it. So, one of the biggest things is that, and that theme throughout Daniel is the fact that God always reigns, whether or not his people are doing a good job of worshiping him. In a lot of mythology, they often tie the little g god's power to how many worshipers they have, which is why they have big gods and small gods, basically, amongst the pagan culture. If you didn't know that, basically, there are some gods that have more power than others. And the reason that is because everyone worships Zeus, whereas not everyone worships some of the minor gods. And they tie it to how many people are there. And I think that's one of the reasons that this is an important point, is the fact that God does not require your worship to be awesome. He does not require your worship to reign over all of the earth. Yes?
And what you said, and so I want to make sure that I understood you. Did you say that they attribute the power of that little g god to how many people are
It's one of the things that it's basically how they describe why there's tiers of gods in the pagan culture. So that's why you've heard of the Big 12, whereas there's other ones, at least in Greek, and then Roman obviously has a mirror image of that. But that same similar idea follows through in a lot of different, I just happen to know more about Greek and Roman. I have not looked into Norse very much, but I assume they would have a very similar idea. But yeah, it's very much tied to it.
Tinkerbell, Peter Pan. They quit clapping, she dies.
Yeah.
And if the Greek gods didn't have worshippers, they lost all their power.
Yeah. Which, honestly, Jeff's preached about from a different point of view. Haiti. Why does voodoo have power? Because they believe it has power. Why does voodoo have no power over me? Because I don't believe it has any power over me.
it's voodoo, hoodoo, whatever it's called?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing if you don't believe it, or covenant witchcraft, or
Yeah. I think there's a certain amount of power that we give to, in Revelation and 3 other places, we get listed off things that we need to watch out for. Witchcraft, I can't list off the whole thing, but all those things are listed off for. It's the same reason it's listed off. Do those things have power on earth? Absolutely. Why do they have power on earth? Because people believe they have power on earth. So it's a very similar idea. Does God's power need us? No. And, I have a very romanticized version of the end of times, because I truly believe in the idea that when the last believer dies is when God's going to call us all home. And that could be that that's 1 in a billion. But the fact is, no, you don't know either, so you can't make fun of me for it. But I do understand that is a very romanticized version of the end of times. But the fact is it does not matter if there's 1 or a million. God's power is God's power. And Daniel is in a time where 100%, most of the people did not believe in God anymore. Moses stood before the people of Israel at enslavement and said, hey, God's ready to save us now. And they all said, well, we're comfortable now. We wanted God to save us 40 years ago. Why did he come now? Why do we care about him anymore? Moses had to stand before them and say, no, you're my people and you go. He faced just as much trials with his people as not just as much, but he faced trials with his people just as much as he did with the Egyptians. Daniel had problems with the, other Israelites just as much as he had with, because sometimes when you're the person standing up for what you believe in, are you really well liked? Do you think sometimes when I stand up at work and say, this is actually what the rules are, people like me for that? Not always. I actually would argue almost never. And, Kayla gets that a lot, especially with money. when she actually says, well, that's the rule, sorry, this isn't me, it's the state law, people don't like those answers. Hey, it's not me, it's God. People don't like those answers. So, but that's what Daniel did. In a time where basically a lot of the Israelite people have given up on God, he still stood strong, and, you can see what happened with his life over what happened with the rest of the Israelites. But did God stop caring about the rest of the Israelites? No. He was there, and he was using his power to guide them back to a way of life. So, thank you. Oh, that was too far. All right. So, if we look at Daniel, it was idolatry in the kingdom of Israel was led to its downfall in 722 when the Assyrians invaded and carried its people into captivity. The smaller nation of Judea lasted until 605, and the Babylonians invaded and began carrying its inhabitants into exile. So Daniel was taken in the first waves of exiles, and he appears to have written this book to encourage his fellow countrymen to remain true to the one true God during that time in exile, and remind them that the Lord still had a plan for them. Daniel accomplished this by not only relating narratives of his own experiences and trials under the foreign rulers, which is basically the first 6 chapters of Daniel, but also by relating the words of the prophecy and interpretations of dreams that God had given him, which is in Daniel 7 through 12. So the key themes throughout Daniel are God leads in our lives, even if it's difficult circumstances. Sometimes faithfulness is rewarded by miracles, and God will be faithful to his people in the future as he was in the past. There is a guy on social media right now that is harping on the fact that the Bible was done being relevant in 70 AD. He is a firm believer that the Bible is 100% true, and it's important, and that Jesus was there, and Jesus was the Son of God, but it stopped being relevant basically in 70 AD. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know much about his reasoning because I don't really listen that much. Because after he said that, I was like, well, he's wrong, and I flipped on to the next. But there is growing contingents of people who want to say, the Bible's not important. It said kill kids in this verse that I cherry-picked out and didn't take into context at all. It said, do this in this very verse that we picked out. So,
There is no God.
yeah.
But right before that says the fool has said in his heart,
Yeah.
there is no God.
So when you cherry pick things out, it's very easy to make something not relevant. But we all know, how relevant is the Bible today? Yes. Yeah. One of the things they actually teach in English, they don't teach this from the Bible perspective, they teach in English, there's only like 66 stories that exist in the world. And of those 66 stories, almost all of them actually have a biblical narrative that matches up with them. So when you read Romeo and Juliet, it matches up to something in the Bible. When you read so basically the idea is there's no new stories today, right? Million stories that are in the than he was in the high points in your life. It hits when you listen. So let's look at is this actually changing for you? Yeah, it is. Okay. So, in lesson 1, the reflection. All right. When is a time in your life that you felt that you've had to take stand for something you believe in? How do you approach the situation, and what happened as a result? So, one of the things that when I was a teenager, 20 years ago, I remember sitting in Culver's, and one of the best compliments I've ever gotten from another teenager. We were talking about sharing Bible, or I was sitting with a Jewish kid and a atheist, plain atheist kid. And we were talking Bible, sitting and talking about things. And the atheist kid, after we got done talking, said, "You know, I appreciate that you've never backed down on what you said." That most kids that say they're Christians, which when I was in school, there was a lot of youth groups in town, so there was a lot of proclaimed teenage Christians, which I don't necessarily say is a bad thing, but, you know, some of them were relying on grace a lot harder than I feel like is necessary. Take that as you want. But he complimented me on the fact that, you know, when I talk to these other kids from these other youth groups, a lot of times they back down, they change, they goes, "Oh, I guess that's not, no, maybe that's not what we believe." And he said, "You just keep the same message. I don't like it, but you keep the same message no matter what I'm bombarding you with." And, you know, that sticks with you when you have those things. You know, it's not like I ever converted him. To this day, I'm sure he's still an atheist. I actually don't know. But those moments that are important is, you know, standing up and saying what you believe change people, and they're noticed. So, does anyone else have a time in your life where you had to stand up for something you believe in? Yes, Libby.
There was this woman in my old apartment building. We would talk about Jesus. And it says, "I don't believe in Jesus." Went on and on. I said, "You believe what you want. I'll believe what I want."
Okay. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of those arguments end, which, you know, they've at least heard you out, which is a step better than a lot of people, because unfortunately we're getting more and more to a world where I can't even hear your point of view because it numbs my brain too much, or whatever they think. Yes, Hal?
You know, Bob, one of the things, we look in the first chapter here, because we see Daniel as he said he wants to do this special diet. And a thing that's interesting is the person that is in charge of this says, "I'm afraid of what my king will say if he sees this." How many of us are faced with people that are afraid of what their boss might say, or something else? They're trying to project that onto you to make you do what, because they don't want to look bad. That's something we all do.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll say, I've been, I think, fairly blessed in my life. I'll say, my very first principal had a degree in Bible. My second principal was a organist at a church. Albeit, obviously not something we believe in, but still, went to church every Sunday. It was an organist. And I'll say, my principal now is God-fearing Catholic, whole life, whole family. All of them are Catholics. And I say that I'm blessed in the fact that there are very few times in my life that in my work life, that I've ever felt like if I voice my opinion on something, I'm going to get reprimanded for it. Now, obviously, in education, there's a line that I know where to leave it, but one of them came up. We have some kids every year when biology class, which we're mandated to teach, evolution. That is a part of the state curriculum. We're not allowed to change that. And one of our biology teachers, who is a Christian, 100% is a Christian, but he has to teach what he has to teach. And it was funny because the principal told the parent, I'm not saying he believes or denies it, but he's in church every Sunday too. Like, we're not trying to force this on you because we have to. It is part of our job, and we have to do it. Those kids, almost every time after they teach that lesson, come down to my math class, and I have to have an entire lecture on, micro versus macro evolution and everything, to a point that first time I ever got talked to wasn't by the principal. But there are kids who get so upset about it because, you have a right to. We can't present the other side of the story. We're just bound by laws. And so it's really hard to sit there and be able to say it. My biology professor was fantastic. He got up and he said, this is one form, this is the form that's in the book, and this is what we're going to talk about. And if you want to have other discussions about that, it's not going to happen between 7 and 3. And the thing is, that was enough for every single one of us to sit there and be like, okay, I feel seen, and, we didn't argue. I can tell you a whole lot of information about evolution, but I also think it's important for us as Christians to understand what they say about evolution, because if you're unknowledgeable about the other side, you can't talk about it. So, yeah. Anyways, but that being said, beyond the things that are just hard lines, I've never felt at my job that I cannot be the Christian. One of our deans carries the Bible around before school. So it's not a terrible environment for that, which I'm very blessed for, because I know many Christians across the nation in schools do not and cannot feel that way, and that's really hard. So, yes.
Classroom a couple of years ago, I had a teacher that was very much for evolution and really pushed it too much. Made me uncomfortable because about every lesson she talked about it. And then the kids picked up on it. And one guy was very upset, and then this other girl that sat by him, and they spoke up. The girl said, I don't want to hear another thing about a monkey and where we came from and where we evolved from. And I know Mr. Brown don't believe that. I throw him under the bus. I know Mr. Brown don't believe in that. You're disrespecting her. And so she was just so startled. She was just like, so if you give us another lesson about a monkey, I'm going to tell my mom to come up here. And she never taught it again.
That's it. As I said, there is a way to do that without frustrating. I mean, do I wish the law was changed? Do I wish that we could discuss both sides? Yes. Is that something that might happen in the future? No idea. But the fact is the reality of where the world is right now, and as far as in that situation, we are stuck as teachers to teach a certain way. But that doesn't mean you have to get up there and be a jerk about it, which unfortunately a lot of teachers are across the nation. Yes.
It kind of shows how much things have changed, because, my dad, Bob Teller, died in '88, and then when he was teaching science and stuff, yeah, he had to do what the school, the evolution stuff, but he had his Bible, and he could read, from Genesis and stuff. But again, that's how much things have changed from back then till now, too, where there was a time where you could say, okay, this is what I'm teaching you, but there's another side. You can believe whatever you want to believe. I'm just going to read what this says.
Yeah.
Take it as that. Or now, from what you're saying, it sounds like you don't even get that option in a classroom setting.
I'll say, one of the most frustrating things for me was, for those of you who don't know, we, for 60 years at Freeport School District, did a Christmas pageant. We wheeled Jesus out there. I mean, we had angels, Mary, the angels. We told Bible verses. We didn't do the call signs, but we said, he is wonderful, he is merciful. We read the story of Jesus and sang songs over it. It was beautiful. If you never saw it, ask Karen about it. It was amazing. Did it for 60 years. It ended because of COVID. And the school district used COVID as an excuse not to bring it back either. Because once we'd stopped for 2 years, they said, well, why don't we try something different? So we did, and unfortunately, it was a success. People just liked it, and I really wanted a mass cry out from Freeport because you talk to a lot of people Karen's age, they'll tell you that is a jewel of our fine arts department. That we ended it with singing Hallelujah. I mean, it was an amazing thing when it was put on right. And it had been dwindling. I mean, we used to sell 1,800 seats to it. Not at the end, we were selling more like 400 or 500. But the fact is I was really hoping when we canceled it that there would be a cry out from Freeport saying, "Hey, you can't do that. Bring it back." 4 people called in. 4. And let me tell you, the district was very easy to ignore 4 people. Because all 4 of those people actually, after they saw the new show, were like, "Oh, that wasn't that bad." And I was like, but, it's hard because I loved that every year. It was frustrating. We put it on. I mean, it was one of those things always leading up to it. I was always like, do this again. We always do the same song. But at the end of the day, watching it every year was just, it sets you up for the Christmas season, and it sets you up, put your mind in God. We did it Sunday afternoon. People came from all over Freeport. But, when we had to cut it, in fact, when our superintendent at the time, who kind of made the final decision, cut it, she said, "You do that in our school?" And that was mind-blowing to her when she came in. But, when I was in high school, we taught Bible classes. The Old Testament was taught as a book, and you could sign up to take Bible. And that was in 2006, that class was offered. So, kind of crazy how times change and how quickly they can change. I'm the person that usually fixes this when I'm clicking and no one's paying attention to me back there. You didn't click. There. All right. So, God has warned his people that if they were unfaithful to him and worshiped idols, he would send enemies to invade them. In Leviticus 26. Unfortunately, the people failed to heed these warnings, and as a result, they were taken into captivity. Daniel would have just a youth when the Babylonians and was taken under King Nebuchadnezzar, conquered Jerusalem, and led the first wave of people into exile. The Babylonians, like other nations in the ancient world, had a policy of incorporating the best and the brightest among their captives for civil service and the government. Daniel is selected, but it is clear even from the opening chapter in this book that he has resolved not to be absorbed into Babylonian culture. So this is, if you look at wartime throughout history, that's a very common thing. If you take over a state or a country or a city-state, going and finding the best people in that, taking them and saying, "Hey, we're going to make you us. The rest of the people are going to live in squalor. But we're going to make you us." And that will make it look like we're not just completely overriding you, but we're basically rewriting your culture. And so, again, from Daniel being in that perspective and saying, "I'm not going to let you rewrite my culture. I'm not going to let you tell me everything." Now, one of the things we see is when it was not a God issue, did Daniel do what the king asked? Yeah. I say, he wasn't being obstinate to be obstinate. Let me tell you, I met a lot of people in my life that are obstinate to be obstinate. They want to say they have a soapbox to stand on every time, but they don't. And so it's important that we see that distinction. He only fought back to the king when it was an issue with his religion. He didn't just stand up for nothing. So we're going to read Daniel 1, 3 through 20, which may or may not appear. Hey, who would like to read that? Oh, never mind. Okay. Why didn't you ring the book thing? Just saying, when I'm not up there. Oh. That means I have 7 minutes then. Oh. I mean, come on. He gave me 5 pages to cover in 40 minutes. That's a lot of information. yeah, I would have had to like speed through all of this. And yeah, you would have lost all my, class leading charm. Yeah. All right, let's read it. We can end with that.
Interpret the meanings of visions and dreams. The training period ordered by the king was completed. The young staff brought all the young men to the kingdom. The king talked with them, and no one impressed them as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service. Whenever the king consulted them in any matter requiring wisdom and balanced judgment, he found them 10 times more capable than any of them and enchanters in his entire kingdom. Daniel remained in the royal service until the first year of the reign of King Cyrus.
So, what were some of the qualifications of the 4 men?
Had to be exceptional.
Good. Yes.
Do you think that's where veganism started?
Deacon-
Was somebody following after that concept?
I do believe it has roots in Buddhism.
Oh, okay.
It is a religious diet, I just don't know which one. So. I don't actually know why Daniel only wanted to eat vegetables, because as a Hebrew, he was allowed to eat other things. It might have been that they were only offering him meats that were from
Idols.
idols. Yeah.
It could have just been to prove a point too.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I feel like that with my vegetarian friends, just trying to prove a point. What were some of the benefits these candidates received?
Some of the benefits these candidates.
Well, they were being taught. They were getting a food allowance, or they were being taught, they were being instructed in what they wanted to do.
Educated.
Yeah. I say, basically, so clearly when they took over these people, they picked out the people that had the most aptitude to be better, and then they made them better. They were getting fed better food, as according to what the people thought at least. They were going to get better education. The average person was not going to get that The name Daniel means God is my judge. Well, Balthazar means Bel protects his life. Bel was the Babylonian god. Why do you think the Babylonians changed Daniel's name?
Well, they changed all their names.
Well, they wanted him to acknowledge their God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who else?
Want to do a simile.
Yeah, they want to do a simile. That's the biggest thing is erase their culture, 100%. Who else? His name was changed in the Bible. That isn't actually denoted in the Bible. It makes it hard to learn about, look for in history. Bonus. Moses.
Sarah.
Yeah, Joseph and Moses both had different names in history. But that's why a lot of historians want to argue that the house we found that probably was Joseph's is not his because, of course, it's an Egyptian name on it. You don't go into an Egyptian household and say, my name's Joseph, and be respected. You were given him a new name. You don't become the second in command with a Hebrew name. So, stuff like that's normal throughout all of our culture. The reason that you don't, see it as much now, which you kind of do, what happens when a foreigner comes here? Actually, it's one of the things that one of my friends, Ms. Baker, complains about. When you have a name, her first name is Francine, and she complained that when she was in school, people tried to change it, make it more white, in her opinion. But, we have a bunch of Middle Eastern kids that are in our school right now. What do? We shorten it to make it easier for us,
Well,
so we don't have to be uncomfortable saying their name every time.
It didn't just happen. People think that it's just happening today or it's just happening to them. But when my grandfather came through Ellis Island, his name ended with a vowel. It got changed to an anglicized version.
Yeah. I say, most of us, it's really hard to find your name past the Mayflower or past the Ellis Island because your name was different. Winter is not the name that we have to follow when you go back to Germany. I don't remember what it was, but someone found it. So, anyways, thank you for paying attention for an extra minute. That will take over next week. So.
just opened a songbook. They're blues. And mark number 327. 327. We'll sing that for, if you will, invitation song. Three 27. And yeah, the mark number 878. Sweet Vine. 878. Okay. There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar. For the Father is over the waves to prepare us a dwelling place there in the sweet quiet light. We shall be on that beautiful shore in the sweet quiet light. We shall be on that beautiful shore. We shall sing on that beautiful shore the melodious songs of the blessed, and our spirits shall sorrow no more. Not a sigh for the blessing of rest in the sweet by and by. We shall be on that beautiful shore in the sweet by and by. We shall be on that beautiful shore to our bountiful Father above. We will offer our tribute of praise for the glorious gift of His love and the blessings that hallow our days in the sweet by and by. We shall be on that beautiful shore in the sweet by and by. We shall be on that beautiful shore. Oh, Ben has tonight.
They had their farm out in the forest. We worked there, and a couple other people worked there. 16 years ago. Like 2 years ago. Doug came up to me after church one day. I'm talking for a second. And he said, hey, when you worked for me, there was some language around the farm that wasn't great. And I just wanted to apologize. And the first thing I said was, Doug, if you said something, I don't remember it, but thank you. And he said, no, it wasn't me. It was the other people that worked there. I was in charge. I shouldn't have let that go on. I should have stopped you. Because I'm sorry that I did. And of course, I told him, I held it against him what other people talk. Thank him. And the thing that stuck with me that I really appreciate about that is that I've been in situations before where I do something or I